Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Full Tank Motorcycle Podcast with me, Rob, from the YouTube channel MotoBob, and as always, my good friend Tim. This week, we're going to be looking at some of the best news stories from the world of biking, as usual, as well as our regular slots of Comment of the Week and Bike of the Week. Except this week, mate, it's Bikes of the Week, and we've got some proper tasty picks. But first up, we've got a story that I think came out beginning of this month. This one's from the US, so that's probably why it's taken us, a little while for the carrier pigeons to get the news over here. But it was that Colorado have legalized lane filtering, and they've become the fifth state after California, Utah, Montana, and Arizona. And what they're saying is that it will allow motorcyclists to filter through stopped traffic at a speed of 15 miles per hour or less. So that's a really specific distinction, mate, which is that filtering, is when the traffic is stopped, whereas lane splitting, I think we just use the terms interchangeably here because it's legal everywhere. But splitting is generally just riding between two lanes of traffic, and they can be moving or not. Yeah. Madness that you can't do it, because I think for us, having both commuted through London for many years on a motorcycle, I think if you couldn't filter, I probably wouldn't bother.
Well, yeah, you might as well be in a car. And yeah, I mean, I do both. I drive through London and ride through London. And the reason I look forward to the ride, despite all the hardship of being out in the cold and wet and rain and the danger of it, to be honest with you, is because you can get there a lot faster and you can be a little bit more nimble, I suppose. But it does have its risks, but it's weird because we call it sort of filtering. I've always called that filtering, but that is lane splitting. Lane splitting makes sense, I suppose, because you're effectively making an extra lane, aren't you, in between the two of them?
Yes, or going around the outside as well, which I think in London is one of the most common ways to just quickly make progress through traffic.
Sure.
You are right that they're talking quite a lot about safety here. That seems to be the main concern over convenience, which I was just talking about. So they're saying that for the next 3 years, the Colorado Department of Transport will collect safety data on lane filtering and issue a report to the Colorado General Assembly regarding the newly passed law. So it sounds like it's, they've approved it, but they've got 3 years to prove that it's not particularly dangerous. Thing is, though, ridermagazine.com say that they've found a study already from 2015 from the University of California, Berkeley, or is it Berkeley?
Berkeley, I think, isn't it?
Dear me. Anyway, lane splitting riders, they found in this study, were less than half as likely to be rear-ended, so 2.6% of the riders in the study versus 4.6%. And I can imagine that. One of the big benefits as well is when you get to stopped traffic, you can sort of either get to the front, which is great, or at least just get yourself out of the way by being somewhere in the mix there and not sat at the back waiting to get shunted. Have you ever been rear-ended?
No, luckily not. No, I've not been rear-ended on the bike or in the car. I'm one of these people that I feel like you've jinxed it now. I feel a little bit nervous now you've actually even asked in the first place.
Sorry. Yes, that is true. I don't think it's ever happened to me either, but I can see how it's very common, especially if you're riding at night and people aren't really quite paying attention, especially things like roundabouts where you roll up, people might expect you to keep going and just don't quite catch you, but definitely it's a nasty way to get bumped.
Yeah, well, for sure, right? Because you can't even brace for it. At least if it's not great to have a head-on or anything where you can actually see it in front of you, but at least you kind of know it's coming, so maybe you can kind of prepare for it a little. Genuinely, I guess the reason I'm a little bit nervous about you asking that is because I'm not happy with the brake light on my bike at the moment, and it is a sort of consideration that I don't think it makes it clear enough that I'm braking, and I'm a little bit worried that I need to be more visible. But yeah, the sort of position, I'm sure you do the same sort of thing when you're riding, right? Your road position, and I do leave myself a little bit exposed here, this probably isn't like the proper technical way of doing it, but it's just what I've learned, is to hang on to one corner of the car, so at least you can go around it if you need to.
I think that's a really good piece of advice, and it is very important in this context because there was some good stats, like the lower likelihood of being shunted from the back, and that means there were fewer head injuries, so less likely, 9% of people splitting versus 17% of those not. A third less likely to sustain a torso injury, and even though fatalities are rare, they were reduced by more than half, so 1.2% of people using lane splitting versus 3% overall. But the downside is that riders who lane split were more than twice as likely to not be rear-ended, but rear-end other vehicles. So 38% of lane splitters versus 16% of non-lane splitters. So I think that's brilliant advice, mate, is that if you are riding like that, make sure you're looking ahead and positioning yourself so that you're not going to, go into the back of somebody. Although potentially somebody could change lanes, and that could be the reason that you end up bumping into them.
Yeah, that sounds like it, isn't it? Normally that, for me, that follows like a gap of some sort. I've had that, in fact, a car sort of pull out on me, and it was as much my fault as theirs, clearly, but there was a truck and then a gap in front of it because the truck moved slower than the cars, and then the car that was on its left decided that, there's a gap there and I can swing into it, and they just moved, no indication, just there's a gap, move straight into it. And yeah, I was lucky to get away with that one, but I can see how that definitely would happen. And I thought you were going to ask me if I'd ever rear-ended anyone myself. And again, luckily...
No, I already know.
Yeah.
Well-known fact about you.
Yeah, luckily not as of yet. But,
there's still time.
Yeah.
I think, look, I'm a huge fan of being able to use the bike to get places quickly, but you have to master the art. It's another discipline of riding with its own specific skill set, and that ability to read the road, read the kind of situation that you're in, and also think about the mentality of the people in the cars as well. Like if they're stuck in a really long line of traffic, the chances of somebody swinging a U-turn, especially in the city, are quite high. Taxis specifically, because they don't want to be sitting there, with dead time, not earning. Quite often will spin round and go somewhere else to look for a fare. So the key thing for me, I've always noticed with that is speed, part of this law is that you can't go quicker than 15 miles per hour. It sounds a little bit prescriptive, but I think in a state where people aren't already lane filtering, so the drivers aren't used to it, that's probably actually a really good law for now. There aren't any speed limits for filtering here, but I will say, much like if you're going around a blind bend, if you can't stop within the sort of distance that you can see, then you're going too fast. And it's the same with filtering. You've got to go at a speed where you feel like you can take evasive action, but also, especially going down the outside of a line or, through the sort of middle of two lanes, you're looking ahead and you're looking for an indicator, a front wheel slightly turned into that lane. So it looks like they're about to move off. Even just the nose of the car starting to move over. And I'm not saying that's going to be foolproof, but I think you've got to just give yourself the best chance possible to stop if there is some kind of issue like that. Yeah,
I do the same sort of thing. I think the 15 miles an hour, it sounds sort of arbitrary, and there's no way you can really enforce that, I don't think. But what I would say is that sort of falls in line with my general rule, and it's dealer's choice, but I generally try and keep no more than sort of 10 mile an hour, 15 mile an hour faster than what the traffic's doing. So if they were doing 30 and I'm doing 40, you're fine. Because sometimes it is crawling along but not stopped. If they're stopped, they're less likely to be finding that gap because there is no gap. They can't go anywhere. So I think sometimes that is a little bit safer,
Ultimately, though, congratulations to the people of Colorado, because there's going to be some people who commute by motorcycle in an urban scenario there that are about to have their commute time halved, probably. So enjoy that and just take care while you're doing it. Next up, we've got a new patent from Yamaha for a semi-automatic MT-07. So that's their, affordable, middleweight, naked bike, a little bit lively, a little bit bonkers, but also, fairly appropriate for newish riders or someone moving up to a big bike. And basically what you've got here is a modified MT-07 that uses a semi-automatic box that's derived from a similar idea to a system that they used to use on their FJR 1300, which was, I think the auto box on that came out in 2006. Basically, the idea is you've got some buttons on the switchgear so you can knock the gears up and down, but there isn't a clutch lever or a shifter peg, because what you've got is an electronic actuator on the clutch down at the engine there, and also on where the shifter peg would be, I guess. And so it basically does everything for you. And the patent also suggests that you can go fully automatic, so you can just get rid of those buttons. It's a little bit like if you were riding with dual clutch transmission, which is Honda's version of it. But the thing with that is it's quite expensive because you've got a completely different clutch with 2 clutches. It's quite a complex system, whereas this is basically different switchgear, the 2 actuators on the clutch and gearbox, and then an electronic control box, I guess. And I think the implications for this are potentially quite big, because that CP2 parallel twin engine that they use in the MT-07 is also used on the R7 sports bike, the Tenere 700 adventure bike, the Tracer 7 Sports Tourer, and the XSR 700 Retro. But I think maybe, the MT-07, the Tenere and the Tracer are probably the most likely applications for something of this nature. Is this something that you care about at all, mate? Like, is this something you'd be interested in?
There was a very brief moment, to bring it back to boring commuting, when I was considering the DCT, getting an Africa Twin that does that, because I was like, the amount of time I'm just in traffic, just crawling along, if I can get rid of doing gears, that makes my commute a little bit easier. But then I swerved away from it, and I think I asked you actually, and I think it was the right choice. I'm happy that I got the sort of control. It's one of those things, I think it makes more sense in cars than it does on bikes, personally. I don't feel like I need it or want it. I mean, part of the joy is in, nailing a good gear change on a corner or something anyway. You feel a bit more involved in the whole process. So I don't think I would personally buy one, but I can see the use case for it, yeah.
I mean, one thing is, if somebody has a physical impairment that means that it's more comfortable for them to ride a bike without a clutch and shifter, then that's great. And this is just more bikes opened up to them, and potentially cheaper bikes as well, because the DCT bikes are generally the more premium ones, like the Goldwing Africa Twin and the NT1100 and stuff like that, although there are some scooters and stuff, so that's good. I think the other kind of idea is that when we talk about stuff like this, it's the town stuff you were just mentioning, in that you would just have this twist and go experience and it would make life easier. But I think the problem is that actually at lower speeds, they can be a little bit clunky. I mean, DCT, they've spent years and years and years refining it, and it still is a little bit of an art to ride smoothly at sort of walking pace and stuff like that. You need to drag the brakes and all that stuff. Is this system realistically going to be as refined as a system that's got 2 clutches and can seamlessly move up and down the gearbox? Probably not. So I'm not sure that I'm not bothered about this either. And then it's got me kind of thinking, well, who's it for? Maybe it's the newer riders who find the clutch and shifting a little bit tricky to get their heads around. So this might be appealing in terms of getting people on a bike. But I would just say, spend the time, do the miles to learn to ride properly, and you'll get more enjoyment, as you say, that satisfaction in the long run.
Yeah, because if you're out for a pleasure ride, you're probably not going to be doing lots of stopping and starting. You're not going to be going somewhere where you're hitting every traffic light. You're going to be going out on a more enjoyable road. So you wouldn't really need it, because you don't, you have to change every now and then the corner, but it's not a hardship. It's actually enjoyable. So to get rid of that, you're actually losing something. And if you were paying more to lose something, I don't know whether that's a good deal to me. But like you say, I think there are certain people that it would maybe get them back out on a bike again because they can't gear change, or it's a bit too hard for them. I think that's a good thing.
It does remind me a little bit of this new e-clutch from Honda. There's some similarities in that you'll get the twist and go nature of it. And also the idea of that system is that it's cheaper to make than DCT. So they're going to put it on the CB650R, the CBR650R, which are sub 10 gram bikes. And I think it's only 100 quid or 200 quid to have the e-clutch spec'd on those bikes, which is pretty impressive.
Yeah.
But with that system, you do still have the clutch lever, so you can take control. And also you can switch it off, I think. And also you still have to make the shifts with the shifter peg. So this really is something that's halfway between the Honda system and DCT. Like I say, not particularly sold myself. I also, thinking back to the last episode when I was talking about the MV Agusta with the smart clutch, and I didn't quite get along with it at low speeds. Again, it was quite clumsy. It also had a little bit of a jolt when you went on the throttle mid-corner. Maybe that's because of the mechanical clutch sort of engaging. Yeah, I didn't really love it, but I've got the CB650R with the E-clutch coming in a couple of months for review. So maybe that'll be enough to change my mind and actually get me excited for something that's kind of halfway between. That said, it's just a patent, so maybe Yamaha are just, protecting some of their research and intellectual property and have no intention of releasing it. It would be interesting to see something competing with Honda on this front, because they seem to be the only ones making auto and semi-auto bikes, certainly internal combustion ones anyway. Next up, well, I'm not sure this is quite news, mate, but it's just something that I've been seeing do the rounds on plenty of motorcycle social media accounts and news websites and stuff like that. There's just some weird bikes and weird builds coming up on YouTube channels, kind of engineering YouTube channels. And maybe that's the lens you have to go to now to be successful on YouTube. But they're pretty phenomenal. There's a channel here called Grind Hard Plumbing. We'll stick this bike on the screen so you can have a little look at it. I've got to say, actually, we had a comment recently that someone had stopped listening to the podcast on audio because they felt it become too visual. So what I will say is, if you are listening on audio, you may benefit from heading to YouTube and watching the full version so you can have a glance at the screen when we talk about stuff like this. But this is effectively, I think they call it the Monster Chopper. It looks like monster truck wheels built into a chopper-style custom frame, and it's actually powered by a KTM V-twin, so I guess like a 1290 or something like that. The whole thing, of course, to achieve something like this is custom built. So the whole frame, the way it interfaces with the wheels, the fork and swing arm, I think the tank, the seat, the bars, everything apart from the engine is just built from the ground up. And it does look pretty phenomenal, doesn't it, mate?
Do you know what it reminds me of instantly is the Bat Tumbler. Batman's bike when it comes out, or is it the pod? I think it's the top pod that comes out of Tumbler. But yeah, his bike basically, Christian Bale version. It's got a tank. I can see from the imagery I'm looking at now that it's got a cushion on the tank, because clearly you're lying chest on the tank to handle this thing. I love the Mad Max style weld. It's like a cross between the two, really.
I was about to say the same thing.
Feast.
It's Batman meets Mad Max, isn't it? It's a proper Mad Max bike.
But yeah, the size of the wheels on that, I'd imagine it would need to be some big KTM, maybe the 1290. But yeah, so it would need to shift that rear wheel, because that is monstrous. It looks cool. I can't imagine it's particularly comfortable, but if you were given the keys, you'd have a go, wouldn't you?
I absolutely would, definitely. It's funny watching the video, because they're saying, at some point, I think they're saying, it's actually pretty good, it handles pretty well. And I'm like, have you just not ridden any of the bikes for a while because you've been working so hard on this? Particular highlight, mate, was when he does a burnout in the studio or their garage to get the... Well, I don't know why he does it, to be honest, but it starts bouncing up and down, which looks quite scary to me. But certainly an impressive build. And then the other one that popped up in my feed, so this is James Bruton. So this is, as I say, more like an engineering channel, but he built what has been named a screw bike or screw motorcycle. And basically the wheels have these diagonal rollers, and they're kind of mounted sort of across the frame, the wheels, if you will. And effectively this means that the bike can move in absolutely any direction by sort of combining different wheel movements. And apparently this is most frequently used in robotics, where you might have a certain robot that needs to just be able to move in absolutely any direction.
I want to know what the top speed of this bad boy is. That's I can't. It doesn't look particularly stable. I don't imagine it.
I think it's about maneuverability and agility over setting a land speed record. But towards the end of the video that they've made about it, where he's actually riding it and showing how it can move in all different directions, it does look kind of comical and also kind of mesmerizing.
Sort of, but also it does look quite fun. I'm not going to lie. I mean, maybe for like 10 minutes, and then you're like, that's cool. What next? But
I remember when I was a kid, I would go to this theme park that was near where we grew up, like once a summer as a school trip or with a club or something. And they had some great rides there, but they also had some kind of more budget stuff. One of them was a BMX where the front wheel, the hub was mounted kind of off center so that it would just go up and down like this. And you just went in there and pedaled it round and nearly puked. And that was apparently the whole fun of it. But this screw bike, Obviously, it's a lot more advanced, but I can just imagine it with a fence around a small race circuit at a theme park, and then just 5 of these, and you put £1 in and see if you can get around the track. That would be fun.
Yeah, for that amount of time, I would definitely give that a go. I'm really impressed with the engineering on it. It is really cool. It makes me think maybe we're missing a trick with that Mad Max bike as well, that maybe we should be making custom bikes, mate. That
Have you got any
SV
ideas?
is just begging for it.
If you had a build idea that you think would go viral and make us both millionaires, what are you thinking?
I mean, I don't know if this is making people that'd be amazing if that was making people millionaires. I'd probably go the same route as them. I'm not that imaginative when it comes to the bikes. I need to be shown what's possible. What would you go with? Have you got something
Caterpillar
in mind?
track, maybe?
That'd be cool. Yeah.
Thanks, mate.
Yeah. Let's go with that one. Yeah. I mean, the corner on that
getting
would be
punctures. Although arguably the screw bike doesn't get punctures. The other problem with the Caterpillar track is it won't really lean. So it'd have to lean the bike, but the track would have to stay.
Exactly.
Anyway, also, my other question for you is, you have to ride either the Monster Chopper or the screw bike for the rest of your life. No choices, no options to get out of this. Which one would you choose?
I mean, I'm going with the monster truck bike.
I thought you
that's going through anything.
For the
Why would I go
filtering.
with the screw bike? No, that thing is post-apocalyptic. If anything does happen, and there's a fair chance that it might, that's the bike I want to be sat on.
I'm just thinking about ease of filtering for your commute, ease of parking. Screw bike, you don't have to. You could park in any space, just go sideways into it. I guess the counter argument there, probably with the Monster Chopper, is number one, you can say you've got a Monster Chopper. And number two, you don't need to filter. You just ride over cars and people.
First and foremost, I already introduced myself saying I got a Monster Chopper. And as you well know, no one's getting in the way of that thing. You know when you see people on in white vans and people avoid them because they're like, that guy's got nothing to lose, when it's got dents in the side of it and stuff, and they're like, I'm going to lose in a fight with that. Same is true of that bike. No one's going to get in the way of that because they know you've got nothing to lose.
Yeah, it's a game of chicken that you'll happily concede as soon as you see it heading towards you. Anyway, speaking of Tim's Monster Chopper, we're on to comment of the week. And we've got a few questions about Tim's new bikes. I thought we'd dive into that and get a few more thoughts since you've had it at your place anyway. I think you bought it a couple of months back, but you've only picked it up from your brothers for a few weeks, right? But Fun with AJ says, for Tim, idea for content for your own channel. Give us a rundown of your new bike, why you chose it, and a bit more in depth. Requiem 2099. Hey, love the recent Urban Rider gear shots of Tim's black Ducati Monster, aka the Monster Chopper. The Monsters definitely lost their iconic look when they went to that weird melted/sloped headlight in the late 2000s. I'd agree, mate. Your bike is much better looking than the later ones. What model/year is Tim's? I briefly owned an M750 Dark back in the day, and I dream of replacing it to this day. So, mate, give us the rundown. What specific bike have you got? Why did you choose it? And what's good about it so far? And what's bad?
So I have a Ducati Monster S2R 800. They did 1,000. I wanted the 1,000. I saw 1,000 for sale, and I could not sell my Africa Twin in time. So I went with the 800. But I like the 800 anyway, because it's the reason I bought it. Another question that sort of came up is that my brother had one who he's actually sold it to me. My dad is still in the family, and it's one of my favourite bikes. You sit on it and you instantly feel at home, and you feel like you know the kind of limitations of it, so you can kind of push it a bit further. So I know I like the bike anyway. They sound great, they ride great, they feel great. The handling is really good for a bike of its age, especially, they need a service if it's like 20 years old anyway. It's a 2004. And the reason I bought it aside from that is that we like monsters. I mean, my dad also has a 750. He's had that for as long as I could. That's the bike he's owned the longest, and it's ridiculous. It's actually, I think, currently in pieces because he has the S2R. He doesn't need it, and it needs a lot of servicing because it's quite old now. I don't know have you ridden a Monster before?
I've only ridden the new one where they've done away with the trellis frame.
Yeah.
It's got like a small aluminium front frame, and the engine is the majority of the structure. So you could argue, I haven't ridden a Monster because a lot of people say that's not a real Monster. So I must come and check yours out. It's definitely on my list of things to do in the near future and get the proper...
Yeah, there's something different about the trellis
Monster
frame
experience.
one. I think you've got quite a good comparison for it, I would say, because the Ducati Scrambler 800...
Yes.
is analogous to kind of like the Monster. It's similar. It certainly has the same sort of pedigree and inspiration, if you like, just sort of developed a little further. So actually there are some sort of parallels between the two of them, and I think it was quite a fun day actually. I went out when I had my Scrambler, and my dad was on his Monster, and they did play well together, really well together. But yeah, it's light, it's fun, it's small, and that's kind of what I needed. I've got a car for doing the boring motorway stuff now, so I don't need to be doing that as much, even though it still comes up way too often that I need to be on the bike doing stupid motorway miles. And that's not really the bike I'd choose, although it actually does all right, because you're in clean air. You've not got like a windscreen kind of firing it at you, and you're leant over a little bit, so it's all right. It's surprisingly comfortable. And it sounds cool, it looks cool, and yeah, it's just the handling is quite precise. You know, it's like I say, you know where you're at with it, you know where the limitations are with it, and that's what I really like, because if you can feel that comfortable on it, you know how far you can start pushing. There's no kind of vagueness to it or question mark.
Any plans to mod, customize, or are you going to try and keep it stock? It's a bike of that age where there's something to be said for that now. Yeah.
There's a sort of, it's just, I think, crossed over, because the previous owner's done a few little tweaks that I'm not a massive fan of. But there's a certain era where it sort of crosses, where you're like, I want to customize this because all of the stuff on it looks kind of Antwac, and I want to get better mirrors and better indicators and stuff. And then it gets to a point where it's nearly classic, and you go, screw it, like it should be kept as original as you can, which is why I think the original exhaust looks quite good, because it's designed to, you know, match the rest of the silhouette, so it does. Totally. It looks really good. And then you've got, I'd probably change simple things like mirrors and whatnot, and there are certain things that I definitely need to change, the biggest one being the lighting, which is not good. They've gone for like 20 quid aftermarket parts that aren't bright enough, and it is one of those things that I'm a little bit, like I say, concerned about how visible the tail light is, the brake light is. I'm just not happy with what they've chosen, so I want to change that. But besides that, no, because I mean, the whole point in a Monster is that it's stripped back. It looks bare bones, as basic as you can get. You can see the frame in it even, you know, so there isn't an awful lot customizing that it needs doing.
Well, maybe to serve as a little bit of inspiration, we can move on to bike or bikes of the week. Because last week, to coincide, well, I'm not sure if it was to coincide with, but it did coincide with MotoGP in Austin, Texas, because it was also the Handbuilt motorcycle show. So yeah, maybe there's something you'll see that you like here. And also whet the old appetite before the Bike Shed show, which is in about a month's time, I think, in London. We'll be there making a pod episode, so it'd be great to see anybody else that's going to make it down. Do say hi if you see us. But yeah, for now, let's have a look at some of the best bikes from the Handbuilt show from the gallery on their website. Now, there were 150 custom bikes there, and the event was sponsored by BMW, and it's been going for 10 years now, so pretty impressive. There's no explanation, mate, on any of these pictures of the bikes, so no build list, no name and model of the bike that is built upon. Some of them have the builder's name, but that's about it. I suppose that's a good reason to still go to the show and get the full lowdown on them. But I picked out some of my favourites, and I want to get your thoughts on them. Now, number one, this is from Revival Cycles, who I think actually set up the show. Clearly some kind of air-cooled Harley situation. But is that not a brilliant, clean-looking, tracker-inspired, simple custom Harley? I think that's absolutely beautiful, don't you think?
Yeah, I do. I really do. A sort of love. I feel like maybe you could put something else in there, that gap under the seat, because it sort of shows that you've taken literally everything out. I'm assuming this has got like an M unit in it to make sure that, you know, and where the hell they're hiding the battery, I have no idea. But yeah, that it actually looks relatively comfortable as well, even though it's quite a sort of slim, low profile seat.
Amazing wheels as well. The only downside I can see, because I agree, it looks possibly more comfortable than an actual stock Sportster, but the downside potentially is that it looks like the peanut tank has become a pine nut tank. Tiny. Looks about 5 litres. And with that engine, you'll probably be lucky to get down the road. Next up, number 2, There's a bit of required culinary knowledge to hang with this conversation. But number 2, look at this. It's a Yamaha, I guess the Yamaha equivalent of like a Honda Cub. And they've human centipeded it together to make a tandem Yamaha for 2. It's got 2 engines as well. How does that work? Do they both drive the rear wheel?
They do look like they're both linked. It doesn't look... Well, maybe. I don't know. It's hard to tell if you can control that.
Does that mean double the power?
Clearly, mate. But then it's also double the weight, isn't it? So...
And it's not double the weight.
Out, doesn't it?
Surely not. Because you've got 2 wheels instead of 4.
It's close, though. You've got 2 bodies on there as well. All right, it's not quite exactly 2x the weight of this because it's missing 2 wheels. You're right.
It also says Yamaha for 2, and it's got a solo seat on the front, but there is a twin seat on the rear, so it should strictly, just a nitpick, be called Yamaha for 2 or 3. Or you could ride it
It's
solo.
also got the pillion pegs as well.
Yes, perfect. Honestly, that would be fantastic. You and I going about our... if we went to the bike shed, for example, going about our podcast business, this would be my choice of company bike if we decide to do that. Number 3 is another Harley. I didn't just pick Harleys, but core blimey, we had to stick this one in here. Again, it looks like quite an old engine, but wrapped up in this sort of race-faring, cafe racer style stretch tank, a big, long gold chain, and then I think that must be a Buell front wheel with that massive disc. What do they call those?
Yeah.
What do you call that when it's mounted to the outer part of the rim? I'm going to call it a peripheral disc because it's mounted to the periphery.
Yeah.
Someone let us know in the comments. But man, that is an absolute beaut, isn't it?
Yeah, that is. It's got sort of the lines and shape of Deluxe. Careful how you pronounce his company's name. Made a Ducati Scrambler in red, and it's got kind of those sorts of vibes to me. I think he might have done more than one actually, but yeah, it's very, very clean. I would say Harley Davidsons in general, however you feel about them, I don't think you can question how good they customize and how well you can get them to look. They're really easy to make them look a little bit extra, a little bit
How
special.
easy? Are we talking you think you could possibly knot one of these together?
Yeah, I'll give it a go.
All right, moving on to number 4, and something that will probably tickle your Ducati penchant. Is that the right word? Do you have a penchant for Ducati?
I've got a penchant for Italian. Yeah.
I don't know how much has necessarily changed on this. It looks like Supersport, doesn't it? Like a 750 or 900 Supersport. But the paint job is fantastic. I think that's probably inspired by some of the Ducatis before it with that teal on the frame.
Is it like a Paul Smart? Is there a Paul Smart colour that's
I think that's right,
similar to that one?
I just pulled it out because I thought it looked brilliant.
Yeah, for those not looking at it, it's silver with a kind of teal blue. Is that teal, would you say?
I think so. Or turquoise.
Greeny blue. Turquoise, yeah, let's go with that. It's really, really nice. I mean, it looks fairly close to how they sort of would have been anyway with the full fairing because... like we said, right? If it's a certain age, you don't want to do too much to it. You could whip all of that off and make it some cafe racer, but I think you would be missing out. You really want to show off all of this.
I think
heritage
what they've done here
and
is
stuff
like
to the lines.
lots of little subtle mods. So smoked windscreen, clear lenses. I assume this is not a standard paint job. Little bar end mirrors, the color matched dry clutch. It looks like aftermarket rear sets. That's the only thing. The pegs are blooming high on this bike. But still very, very cool. Should we move on to number 5?
Yeah.
Look at this, mate. I think it was a few episodes back where we looked at a Harley Pan America that had been customized into this really aggressive, almost like enduro bike, and they'd fitted a Honda CRF front end and that sort of thing. This is taking the Pan America in a completely different direction. It's been converted into kind of like a Street Fighter race bike,
Supermoto almost. There's a little bit of that element to it.
Because it looks like it's quite tall, but then you've got that flat number board on the front, which makes it look a bit flat track. I don't know.
It looks
what
like it's on its
mate.
nose as well, a little bit though, right? And it also looks a little bit like the front wheel's smaller than the rear, or maybe that's just the tyre. They probably are 17s, aren't they?
Yes.
Yeah, it's got that Indian FTR, like the newer versions of it, where it's 1717 as opposed to the flat track one. It's got that kind of look to it. It's also got what looks like a crotch pulverizer. That's great. I love to see that.
Is it not
I love
a
it when
protector?
the
It looks cushioned.
Yeah, I guess. It's also really, really like straight. That's a 90-degree angle straight into your plums.
That is going to depend massively on the density of the foam inside, basically.
Yeah, that's a deal breaker for me. I'm going to say, if I get on there and I don't feel kind of memory foam-esque, then I'm walking away.
How long does that memory foam sort of remember the shape? Because that would be quite amazing to get off the bike and see what it... Just two tiny little...
No, we've already discussed Monster Chopper.
A great paint job on this one as well.
Yeah.
It's got to be said. I think that's celebrating 120 years of Harley. Is that this year? When was the Harley 120th anniversary? Was that last year? That was last year, wasn't it?
I think, yeah, a little
Yeah.
way back.
2023. So a bit out of date, but at least they've got it down to the show. Worth showing off, definitely. Number 6. Whoa, look at this, man. Cafe Racer. It's a Jigsaw. Again, very clean, simple. Get as much off the bike as you can. Fluoro windscreen. What do you think of that? Fan or not a fan?
Yeah, it's a choice, isn't it?
Yes. It is a choice. But is it a good one?
I mean, it goes with the colours they've gone for. It isn't anything I would choose for myself ever. But yeah, no, it goes with their design.
What I really like about this bike is the kind of aggressive forward angle on it as well. And they've pretty much matched that fairing perfectly with the sort of angle from the seat unit and stuff like that. Sometimes you see custom builds, especially on bikes of this era, where the tank shape is quite sculpted. And then to do the cafe thing, it's tough to get it all to hang together, I think. But this one nails it. Although I suppose it's probably not quite as aggressive in that downward slant once it's off that paddock stand. That's a good trick to make your bike look a bit more sporty.
Yeah.
Number 7, I think this is a Kawasaki, isn't it? Yeah, KZ 615 TT. Again, not too much going on here, but that is absolutely stunning.
It's different. I like the sort of the variety you've gone with your favourite bikes or top picks from this
There's
one.
no point in picking all the same bike, is there? You've got to go for
Well, no,
a little
exactly.
bit of
And
everything.
also impressive the variety they've actually got. They've got quite a good span there. There isn't just like one theme.
Yes.
Yeah, and all sorts of different eras as well. Really, I love like a pure red colour like that. There is something nice about it. It's kind of old school, and I love that. It's like a cherry red that you can, or almost like a Ferrari red actually on that. That you can really delight in polishing it up, I always find.
Very nice, especially with the little gold and black accents. And I love that they've blacked out the rims and the hardware around the headlight and the engine. And yeah, that really makes the red pop. Little ducktail on the back, signature Kawasaki feature of that era. I think that's really, really nice. Last one, it's just the standard
Yeah, what
BR1219.
I was going to ask you, what's different about it, mate?
Nothing. This was in the Builders Gallery on the Handbuilt Motorcycle Show website. And I guess that is what you get if you sponsor the show, BMW Motorrad, is you can just put your standard bike in the Builders Gallery and get a bit of coverage.
Just hope that no
it.
one notices or what? Or just be like, and look, we made one as well. Yeah.
I think there were a few other BMWs amongst the 150 bikes, and maybe they did commission them. I know that they put a lot of effort in for the Bike Shed show in London every year, and there are some interesting builds that they've somehow, been involved with. So I'm not completely slagging them off for their involvement here, but yeah, they did have this and the normal R12. That's the one we were reviewing as well the other week. Probably not the exact bike. But it is nice looking. I'll give them that. The red frame gives it a bit
As
of a
far
look.
as like a stock bike goes, yeah, it looks like it's been customized. It's only when you see them parked up together and you're like, oh, they are all the same. So yeah, it's not. It looks like, anyone who doesn't know about bikes would think maybe that you tweaked it or maybe it was your own little Cafe Racer custom job. So it does the job.
Yeah, they may do. Look, I've only given you 8 of the 150 there, but they're my personal highlights. You can ride one away, or you could take the screw bike or the monster chopper. Sorry, I can't say that without laughing now. Does one of these 8 trump the monster chopper?
The monster chopper is if that was in this show, first of all, it'd take up the spot of at least 3 of these bikes.
Surprise.
Maybe not the Yamaha bike made for 2. But there's actually one I'd like to throw into the mix that I don't think you picked up on. And the reason I like it is it's a Ducati 996. I'll give you time to sort of scan through. It's green. It is the model they used in the Matrix. And it's also the colour scheme. They went with this sort of standard green. And I think that one looks real nice as well. They've got a kind of polished tank on it, and then the rest of the fairing is original green, and then they've got a nice tan seat as well. I think it just all works really well together, and the gold obviously sets off the green quite nicely. So I'd like to get your opinion on that one. What do you reckon of that one?
It is nice. And I know that you've got a penchant for Ducatis, as we just established. So yeah, I quite like it. But I think for that, a 916 or a 996 or a 998, I'd probably go stock. Because it's not the actual Matrix one as well.
No, I don't think that's the actual one. Yeah, that's not the one they used in the movie or anything. I just, whenever I see that pop up, I don't know, from that whole catalogue, and there was a lot of them, and I scanned through, that was the one that, for whatever reason, sort of drew me. But even allowing for that, I still think I'd be going with the Monster Chopper, I'm afraid, mate. I just need to find a place to park it. It'd probably take up both of my parking spaces, but I'm standing firm on that.
All right, fair play. I'll take the screw bike. A massive thanks to everybody for listening today. If you are listening on audio, like I say, you can head over to the YouTube version on the Full Tank Motorcycle Podcast YouTube channel, and also leave your comments there, which you can't do if you're just listening to audio. Equally, if you watch on YouTube, but you just want some company while you're out driving or out for a run, I wouldn't suggest doing either of those activities staring at a screen. So we are on all the major podcast apps. We'll see you next week when we're back with another episode. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you then.